Hello and welcome to this presentation about qualitative methods. So we're going to be looking at this idea that information can come in the form of words, where you're explaining how you think and feel and the reasons why you behave the way you do. Just like if you're having a conversation with your friend and they're talking to you about, well, why do you think you do that? And you try to articulate it, you try to put it into words. It's probably to do with how you see yourself, how you see the situation. Well, I did it because I feel like this is who I am, or that's what was happening, or that's who they are. So, interpretivism is a name for people who are interested in finding out that kind of information. The interpretivists think it's possible to get a really deep understanding of how people see the world from their individual position. And when you get that deep empathy from the point of view of the individual, it's called Verstehen, which is this word that Weber used to describe this ability to understand the subjective interpretation of the world of the other. For example, there's studies by Oakley, a feminist who is trying to understand how women experience motherhood and what it's like to try to bond with your child, the pressure of being a mother and being seen as someone who should naturally nurture their child but struggling with the emotional bond with your child and the effort and misery or pain of the whole experience, as well as the beautiful side of it. And just trying to reconstruct or take apart that whole idea that it's just brilliant and it works naturally, and try and show that it takes a lot of effort and it's a form of work. So the interpretivists are very critical of the positivists, because the positivists say that it's possible to study the world scientifically, but the interpretivists say you can't do that because human beings are not like objects in the natural world. So the positivists said that human beings are predictable, just like objects and processes in the natural world. We can study human beings. We can study how they're pressured to do things, how they can behave in certain ways because of the wider kind of forces that impact upon us. So, like Durkheim talked about integration as being the underlying factor that can explain suicide. If people are not bonded to each other, they might commit suicide. But interpretivists like Atkinson said, you can't actually use those numbers and figures. They're not really facts anyway, because they were created and collected by human beings who themselves are influenced by their beliefs. And so the actual beliefs and feelings and experiences are more important. The numbers are not accurate, they're not true. So the only thing we can do is really find out about how people see the world, feel and experience and their attitudes towards the world. So the interpretivists use qualitative methods. Unstructured interviews, for example, have lots of strengths and weaknesses. Their strengths are that they enable you to do what we said, achieve Verstehen, help get us this deep understanding. So the interpretivists value it in terms of detail. But the positivists would say the weakness is low reliability. You can't measure things consistently and systematically and consistently repeat results with unstructured interviews, because people talk about things differently. They're influenced by who the other person is who's researching and interviewing them, and they can be very subjective and biased, because it could be that there's interview effect because they're in an interview, or interviewer effect. It's because they're being interviewed by someone from a different group with different social characteristics, different class, different age and gender, ethnicity. So that affects the validity of the results. Observations are often used by interpretivists to actually either observe people from a distance, a bit like someone observing a lesson in a college or a school. They don't take part in the lesson, they don't teach or learn, they're just watching what takes place. And that's called non-participant observation. But there's another way of doing research where you actually get involved in the lifestyle of the group you're studying, and that's called participant observation. And that can give you a better sense of how people see the world, because you're actually there in their lifestyle as maybe even part of their group. And If you try and join in without telling them you're a researcher, that's called covert participant observation. If you try and join in and you tell them who you are and what you're doing as a researcher, then that's called overt participant observation because you're being open. Whereas covert is closed, like a secret agent undercover. So this general approach where you're trying to gather information, it's very descriptive, detailed, you're seeing things, you're asking lots of questions. That's called ethnography because you're trying to write about the way of life of a group. So graphy, like in the word calligraphy, is about writing, and ethno is about the way of life or of culture and lifestyle of a group. And so trying to write, trying to describe, trying to explain the way of life of a group is called ethnography. And originally that technique was used by anthropologists who study civilizations, especially primitive civilizations, like in tribes in Africa, for example, Papua New Guinea. But that influenced interpretivists studying social life in modern society to use those same kind of techniques, observations and interviews, a long amount of time spent with a group, so you get this general sense of their way of life over time. There are many problems with this approach, generally, the ethnographic interviews and observation approach, because it's seen as very biased. It's more likely to involve the researcher, and their characteristics, their beliefs and values are likely to influence the research, and that's called researcher imposition. It leads to a lot of subjectivity, which is where the individual's beliefs affect the outcome of the results, and it's biased. So there's a great deal of problems with it, according to positivists. It's not scientific, doesn't offer an objective approach. It's going to fail to understand wider patterns and trends because you tend to get smaller samples. You're unlikely to be able to get a cross-section of a whole group because you've got a more time-consuming approach. So you can't apply the results on a big scale to everyone in the whole group. So as a kind of compromise between the two approaches of positivism and quantitative methods and interpretivism and qualitative methods, you've got a mixed methods approach which combines both kinds of methodologies or ways of doing research. And this approach is often associated with the idea of being practical, just doing whatever suits your topic. So if you're interested in identity and in-depth exploration, you might do more detailed study. If you're interested in wider patterns, maybe a more social facts, quantitative study. And so if you combine those approaches just based on whatever your topic is, that's called a pragmatic approach, just being practical about the methods you use based on the choice of topic. When you check and compare all the results together so that you can improve the depth you get and replicate the results, that's called triangulation. So for example, you could compare, let's say we do a study of sociology. You want to find out, do people like sociology? You see that they do in the observations, you see that they do in the unstructured interviews, and you see that they do in the questionnaires. And so you've repeated the same outcome in every method. You can check and compare all of that, and they do like sociology. So that would improve the reliability of the study. And you're also going to get much more data, which gives you an in-depth understanding. So the interpretivists and the positivists would like the different elements of reliability or depth, respectively. There's also the idea of mixing different approaches or ways of doing research, like a quantitative number-based approach and a scientific approach, a more words, descriptive, detailed approach. And when you mix together and you use more than one, that's called methodological pluralism. And that really involves no one approach being better or worse than another. It says that they're all equal, all methods are equal. They can all be used, and you just choose whatever one suits your approach and suits your topic. If you have any questions, just send me an email. I hope you found this useful.